and good evening. Thanks for waiting. Sorry for the delay. Had some technical issues on my end tonight. Hope you all are well. Let me know if I need to adjust any settings. The music might still be a little loud. You can let me know. So tonight I'm going to make some mug forms, and then I'm also going to throw some platters hopefully, so we'll see where we get with that. The mugs I'm going to use to practice some, I got an order for some like tiki styled mugs, and I haven't actually had a chance to try out making any, so I'm going to try making some. I'm going to start with just the forms, and then I'll probably sculpt them tomorrow. And then I also had a request on stream last week to do some like face hugger inspired mugs, so we'll see how that goes. And I have the teapots in the kiln right now, and glazing should happen a little bit later this week. The challenge this week is a blindfolded bowl, and I'm just not in the right mind to do it tonight. I had so many technical issues before this started, so I'll do that tomorrow. First part of the stream tomorrow, I'll do the pottery throwdown challenge. Hey, Maki, how are you this evening? Good to see you. Sorry for the delay. I know it's late for you. I'm gonna have to adjust this camera a little bit. Yeah. And let's see. Eating a clementine and going to sleep. Nice. Love clementines. I'm doing well. I had a long day. So I have a basement studio here, and I just bought a new computer so that I could stream better. And with all the dust and humidity in the studio, I didn't actually want to keep the new computer down here with everything. So I spent my literal entire day running a series of wires and cables through the house, through the floor, through everywhere, so that now the computer itself is residing upstairs in a very safe location, and then I'm still getting all of the cameras and keyboards and monitors and everything down here in the studio. So it's just apparently going through all of that, changed some things. So I'm doing well, and I'm happy that I got it done. It just took a lot of work, and yeah, and I thought it would just start up and be okay, but as soon as I started the stream, my windows for everything that I can see where I interact with the stream were really messed up, and so I had to get everything back in the right size and fix it all right at 10 minutes before the stream started, and it was just a little bit of madness, but all in all, it's been a great day, and really happy about getting the computer in a good spot. Hey, Gru, how are you? Hope all is well. My fellow hitchhiker. Yeah, I love throwing mugs. It's definitely my go-to when I'm just trying to stay calm and make fun work. So these are gonna be, some of them are gonna be a little sculptural. So I'm really just making the base forms, and then I'm gonna go through and do some sculpting tomorrow, and we'll see how that goes. So try to just make feel like it's not. The image to me looks a little fuzzy, so I don't know if it's just how the focus is or not. Let me know what you think. Looks okay to you? A little bit fuzzy? Yeah. I'm gonna see if I can focus it up a little bit. Woo! Well, this is fun. Oh my goodness. Maybe the zoom had something to do with it there. Let's see. All right. Oh, stream, please work with me. I don't know why this camera resets every time. Hey, Zadel, how are ya? Welcome. Alright. I'm gonna stop fiddling here. So Zato, you got your second shot today. You're not feeling so fresh. Well, congratulations on getting your shot. I've heard the side effects are pretty rough right afterwards, but I'm doing good. Just working kinks right here at the beginning of the stream. I figured I could fart around with the cameras on stream instead of off stream, so I think it's okay now though. Yeah, I've heard the side effects are pretty harsh, but should be worth it. Should be. I haven't been able to get mine yet, so hopefully that'll come pretty soon down the line. Hello, Shelf. I am working on, to start with, I'm going to do some mug forms, and then I'm going to do some platters. And then tomorrow I'll do the throwdown challenge and some sculpting. Alexi, hey! Good evening, how are you? Oh, nice. So you're first responder, so you get high priority. Thank you for your everything you've done. Alright. I'm doing great, Alexi. Been working hard to get the stream running at a little bit of a higher higher level, and it's going pretty well. Personally doing all right, and just kind of working constantly, which is pretty normal as an artist. Oh, thanks so much, Alexi. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it's understandable, Zoto, that you can't stream very regularly. Oh yeah, I actually have 2 new cameras. Both of these cameras are new from the first 2 weeks. So the first week I was using literally cell phone and an iPad. now I have 2 Logitech webcams. Nice, Alexi. Yes, Drew. I am very familiar with Bailey equipment. I would not say that it's my favorite. I've not used the slab rollers, but I've used plenty of their kilns. I have personally, I have I think it's a North Star slab roller right behind me here in the studio. I think a good amount of people in the chat right now are pottery makers. Potters. I've seen Zottel and Gru both throwing. No problem. Is it a gas kiln, Gru, or electric? Electric up to cone 10. Nice. Programmable. Nice. Well, I mean, 16.5 sounds like a really nice kiln. I would check. So, it sounds like a pretty good deal. I would check that the elements and that the thermocouples are a regular size, because I have bought Bailey kilns that you can, it's ridiculous, you buy the kiln from Bailey and then you go to their website and they don't even sell the right size thermocouples for the kiln that they made, put together, and shipped out. So just watch, if you can, get all the specs that you possibly can. Yeah, really, it's I've had some nightmarish issues with Bailey equipment, so I tend to never buy Bailey equipment if I can help it. I think a lot of it is kind of shoddy, but a deal's a deal, just like a roll's a roll and a toll's a toll, and you have to sometimes just take what's available. So is it a front loader? Alexi, Mud Mama is my wife, and Mountain Mama is my mom, actually. My mama, yeah. It's a top loader like an Olympic. Okay. Oh, no worries. It's all right. So, 16.5 oval. Yeah, that's definitely that's a massive one. I have a pretty big kiln as well, top loader, but it's just round and it's super deep. It gets kind of awkward if you have any back issues, but if it's just oval and you can fit a lot of the work in without having to bend over too far, it's probably not bad. You know, if you're going to be spending $3K, I would make sure that the kiln is everything that you want. You know, it's, I don't know. It's a lot of money, and I tend to just kind of lean towards what I think is the most convenient for my work style. Lists at 7K. See, that's what I mean. I assume that it was worth, or I assume that it cost more than you were going to pay for it. So, but you also, I mean, if it's used and the elements are old, you may end up spending damn near $1,000 in elements. So, you know, that depends on how many are in there, and so yeah, we'll see. But under 50% seems like a good deal. Yeah, I'd love to go anywhere in Europe I haven't. I hardly travel around the States. It's hard these days. Yeah, I've heard of Bailey equipment. The really what you're buying when you get a kiln is you're buying a bunch of bricks and a kiln controller, and it really, you know, all the money is tied up in the elements and making sure that you can replace the parts easily and figuring out what the price you're gonna have to spend on elements every time you need to replace it is a pretty good place to start for figuring out what maintenance costs on it and then going from there. But I love programmable kilns. I wouldn't get a kiln anymore without some sort of electric controller on it. You're still using a kiln sitter? Yeah, I've stayed away from them as much as I possibly can. I even have a couple old electronic controllers sitting around if I ever need to replace or repair. I've got a couple Bartlett controllers just sitting in the shop. Well, Zotto, I can promise you that it's probably better than America. I really like the electric kiln controllers, Drew. You have there's a lot that you can do as far as taking control of cooling cycles and ramp cycles, and it makes it so that you can do unique programs like crystal firings. And I mean, I know you can do that with your cone sitters as well, but you can get very, very precise as far as how many degrees that you're dropping per hour, you know, what your ramp is, how high you're going to get per hour. It's really nice and convenient for programming unique firings. Oh no. Yeah, I do crystals sometimes as well. I have a recipe that I got a while back for Cone 6, and I did a lot of experimenting, and so mine aren't Cone 10 crystals, they're Cone 6 crystals, and they're pretty nice. I really like the result. Yeah, I've got, I think there's a piece on the wall right behind me, actually. Let me cut this off, I'll grab it. Yeah, you called it. They're right behind me. So all of the like starburst, floral kind of bursts on there are little crystals that grow in the firing. Yeah, they're fun. Yeah, I really like the crystals. It's a nice way to just add a pop of color real quick. And the recipe for the crystals is actually a glaze. So I don't formulate my own clay, but my wife and I, we make all of our own glazes. Yeah. So I buy most of my clay because it's quick and easy, and besides the reclaim, which takes a lot of time to make, that's kind of a conglomerate clay body, and then most of the glazes I make are it depends on the day, but my wife or myself will make the glaze that we need for the studio. Yeah, there's a lot of people who make some really, really nice crystal work. And if you can really dial it in, you can get some really interesting macro crystals. And I just haven't taken the time besides... yeah, I figured you meant Instagram. Yeah. And with a lot more experimenting, you can get a lot more different results. So it depends on like what metals you're adding to the glaze, on what color the crystals are going to be, what color the background of the piece is going to be, and how they interact. And then your firing cycle in your kiln is going to determine how big or what shape the crystals are. So when we're talking about crystals, Alexi, we're talking about a macro crystal that grows in the glaze. So the crystal is actually a zinc crystal, and the crystal itself forms during the cooling process. It's like a technically sort of a defect that started happening, and then people started trying to figure out what was exactly happening, and then they figured out, oh well, this is how I can make this happen. So then they started figuring out that a slow cool cycle, so somewhere between 1800 and 1900 degrees Fahrenheit, I don't know what that is in Celsius, will give you a chance or an opportunity to grow those zinc crystals if your glaze has a high enough zinc content. And yeah, so depending on what metals are in your glaze, what temperature you cool it at, so you fire up to peak temperature and then you bring it down, and then you hold it for a long period of time, anywhere up to like even 4 hours or so. And then yeah, the longer you hold, the bigger the crystals get. Let's see. Yeah, grew ramp slow, ramp slow, ramp slow. Yeah. Yes, we do freedom units. Yes, Otto, I can give you a just a basic firing cycle if you ever get a chance to try it. Sure thing. I actually bought a bunch of books. They were kind of hard to find, but there's some nice books out there. I don't remember specifically what the names of them are, but they're all pertaining to crystalline glazes, and there's lots of different recipes and firing cycles to reference in those books. Some of them are very expensive now. Yeah. Yes, there's a lot of chemistry involved in in pottery. You don't have to know any chemistry to make pottery and enjoy it, but if you want to get into how to make your own glazes and firings and all that good stuff, then eventually you're gonna start to have to understand a bit of it. There's also, so just beyond the, yeah. So beyond the macro crystals, there's also microcrystalline glazes, which are where you're taking and trying to get small crystals to grow on the surface, and that's a lot easier, but slow cooling still helps out a lot with that. So there are like Tomoku glazes, which, you know, there's a whole line. There's just a lot of iron saturates are basically microcrystalline glazes. So an iron saturate glaze is where you have a very high percentage of iron, which eventually starts to act a bit like a flux in a glaze, and then go down that rabbit hole of flux in a glaze is the chemical which you add to the glaze to help make the silica and clay body melt at the same temperatures. So the more flux you add, the more melty it's going to get. The flux capacitor, yes. That's where I threw my towel. probably a lot less action. Little bit more of a relaxed show there. Oh my goodness. Zotto says, on my search for a reliable firing service, I met some really weird people earning their money with pottery, knowing far less than me and telling the customers BS. Yep. You're on the edge of your seat. Yeah, unfortunately, there are, I mean, anyone with a kiln is going to be able to say that they can offer a firing service, but there's a big difference between someone who knows how to use their kiln and maintain it. Oh, that's sad. Luckily for me, most of the people who do pottery near me or in the areas surrounding where I'm at have been very knowledgeable and professional, and most people are very helpful, and it's a pretty good community where I'm at. I've not had that sort of issue, but I also haven't really needed to seek out firings. I am a person that offers firings, so hopefully when people find me, they're not weirded out, but I tend to know what I'm talking about. So, Alexi, basically the answer to that question is they can be as big as you can imagine. The kilns that a lot of home potters use are, I think the average size is probably the 6.9 cubic foot, which is like it's about 15 inches across in round and about 3 feet deep. And there are kilns that you can walk inside of, or in the side of a mountain. Like multiple chambers can be created to fire the work inside of. Some facilities have giant it's what we call car kilns, where we have racks that you can roll in and out of the kiln and you fire the work on them. Most of the kilns that are that big, if you turn it on, it's not going to be hot enough to hurt you. You would have to literally get trapped inside of it. And most of the ones that are actually using fire, where you're using gas to start the heat, the fire isn't blowing right onto the wares. There's typically some sort of buffer or wall that kind of catches the flame before it touches the pottery directly, or at least wicks it up and then have the fire come back down and heat everything up. Yeah, firewall. problem, Gru. I mean, I wouldn't want to be trapped inside of a kiln that got turned on. That would be some. That's like getting cremated alive, man. Kilns, yeah, exactly. Who killed? Tagline would be Walter moved on from death, now he produces pop. So it's nice you have a squeaky chair as well, yep. Oh, thanks, Maki. Have a great evening. Hope you enjoy your rest. Have a great night. We'll see you next time. Yeah. Well, I hope you feel better soon, Zottle. Thanks so much for hanging out for a little while. Nighty night. claking bad. I like the spin-offs. I can't help myself. I'm easily amused. Yeah, right? Yeah, yeah. The Harry Potter references come up a lot. There's some things you just can't fight. I chose to fight ghosting. I accept all Harry Potter references, but there's no ghosting allowed. Nothing against Swayze, just the pottery scene in Ghost. That's all. There you go. You have to choose your battles. Yes, a goblet of fire. I've made plenty of goblets with fire. That'd be a really good YouTube title for a video. Harry Potter makes goblet of fire. Yes, please do that. I'll put it on the list. Yeah, I made like a sculptural vase type piece that was like elemental. Oh, I finally realized what the squeak you were talking about is. It's my pedal for my wheel. I'll have to I have to put some WD-40 on it. Because I had noticed last week that my stool was making god-awful noises every time it moved around, so I put some felt pads on the bottom of the stool so it wouldn't make any more noise. You read all the books a long time ago, but you haven't seen any of the movies? Yeah. My daughter recently, she's 8, and I guess it was just the middle of last year during quarantine, we rewatched all of the movies with her. She enjoyed them. she liked all of the movies so much, she ended up getting a couple pieces of like Lego makes Harry Potter kit sets. So she got a couple of Harry Potter Lego sets that she enjoys. Hashtag not sponsored. With all the mugs, I'm gonna do some. So they're all just test pieces, basically. I'm gonna do some. I got an order over the winter, or towards the end of summer last year. A friend of mine is getting married this year, and he requested some tiki mugs. So, like tiki heads or like tiki themed type mugs. So I'm going to try and do a few tiki mugs. So I'm going to sculpt them or add things to them to try to make them look like tiki heads or tiki inspired pieces. And then on stream last week on Thursday, a couple of the viewers requested I was working on that sculpted teapot, and I guess it inspired them of like the insectoid face huggers from the Alien movies. So I said I would try and make a face hugger on a mug. So I'm going to try to sculpt one of those too. Oh, that's a really interesting idea, Lexi. To do a stackable tiki totem when they're not in use. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So that's definitely something that can be done pretty easily if I trim them and make them make the foot ring the same size as the openings, and I could measure all of them so that would happen. I'm just trying to I didn't even weigh out these balls of clay. Typically I weigh out to get everything the exact same size, but because I'm just playing and I want to see different sizes, I just got a bunch of different size balls that I can throw into different shapes and then go from there. So the end result can definitely be different than what I'm playing with right now. You'd be surprised. You can actually stack them up without it I mean, obviously if you have cats or something, you would, or small children, you wouldn't want to do that. But if you had a cabinet where you kept all of your fine china or whatever, or a way that you could have a shelf of something that wasn't going to get disturbed, you could probably make it happen without it being a big deal. But that would be a really fun way to interact with them. Yeah, I think it's a really good idea, Alexi. I could definitely work towards that goal in the end. So the only thing I have to do is just measure to make sure that each piece fits inside the next one, so that the foot on one would just go right inside and kind of have it so it fit inside, but there's still just enough room for it to kind of lock so that the bottom edge sits on the rim, but there's a foot ring that kind of locks it in place. A lot like the lid for a jar would be. But I think that's a really neat idea, or a way to interact with them. And it would also be pretty cool for them to have them set up kind of like that, maybe in stacks of 3 or 4 as they're giving them away to the people who are going to the wedding, so that they could like come off the little totem stacks. I do pieces that fit together a lot, yeah. So the like just the other day I threw a coffee jug, and the coffee jug has it's a big bottle, and then it's got a wide opening, and then there's a solid lid that sits down inside of that, and then there's a cup or a mug that you can carry around with it, and that sits over top, upside down, over top of all of that. So there's like 3 interlocking pieces that all go together. And I do like all the lids for the teapots and the jars and all of those things are all very yeah, it's the same sort of thing. You're measuring everything and trimming it so they all fit together. And when you're doing plate sets or bowl sets, especially plates, you want to make sure that you're like the widest flat area on the plate. You want to make sure that the foot ring of the one or of all of them is basically the same size, so that they all sit inside that primary area. So you trim them all to fit inside of each other so that they stack up without kind of sitting on the rims or getting stacked real weird. So yeah, you definitely get to play with that sort of thing all the time. Putting a foot on the piece is a lot like, actually I have this is the double walled pot that I threw last week, but you can see it kind of gets trimmed back a bit, and then it has a ring. This is called a foot ring, and then there's the clay missing from the underside, and then this pot just sits on this little ring. So you can see if it was like, if there was another piece that was the same thickness, you just kind of put it in there, and then this little foot would lock inside. Yep. In pottery, we refer to all of the parts of a pot as like human anatomy. So the part where it comes off at the top, this is called the lip of the pot. And then if I were to kind of choke it in a little bit, like this right here is the neck of the pot. And then if I give it a little puff right here, this would be the shoulder. And then if I like puffed it out, that would be the belly of the pot. And then it goes down to the foot. So foot, belly, shoulder, neck, lip. Yeah. So when you put them in the kiln, it's super creepy. Sorry, I had to bring it back. Make it not so wholesome. Yeah, so when I'm making pots, I try to keep in mind a lot of symmetry and balance, and that way I can keep my pieces working towards this kind of aesthetic that lends itself to that human anatomy, so that you can get, that's what makes people attracted to the pieces, honestly. You're like, oh, I don't really understand why I like that piece so much. And then you start to realize that it's just got this natural form that you're kind of drawn to. This week on Claking Bad, the Harry Potter sets the goblet on fire. All right, so for the process of actually throwing a cylinder, the first thing I'm going to do is called centering. So this is the process of getting the clay into the middle of the wheel. And so ideally, I mean, I could literally center the clay with just one hand, like so. Clay's centered enough to open, but yeah, all the muggles, for all the muggles out there who need to know about this. So, but the idea is that I'm making the clay take the shape of my hand, and I'm providing enough pressure in and down. So I'm pressing in and down into the clay so that I'm causing compression, and I'm creating enough compression that it's staying right in the center of the wheel. So it's if I didn't lock my elbow so that my arm is just kind of floating and I start pressing, it starts to get out of control really fast. And so that's what that's what happens to most people the first time they sit down at the wheel. They get this thing and it starts kicking around and they're like riding a horse and they're like, oh my god, why? And so that's because they're not locking their elbow. So to lock your elbow, you kind of have to lock it into your thigh. I just kind of lean onto my arm and create pressure here. So a lot of centering is more about posture than it is about being strong. And it's about creating a firm pressure against the clay. And so centering the clay isn't just, this primarily provides just the form on the side. And then it can be off center on the top too. So if it's kind of like, you can see it looks like my finger is going over a really warped record. And that's because the top is off-centered. So I want the whole thing. I want the sides, I want the top, I want everything to be this little mound that doesn't have any wobble in it. And it's also real easy to throw it off-center if you don't do it. Everything that you do with clay needs to be this slow, methodical process. So if you're trying to center the clay and you're just pressing and then you let go real fast, it goes off center again. It's because you have to work at the speed of the wheel. So if I draw this line on the wheel here, I need to wait for this line to come around before the shape of the clay is actually changed. Otherwise, I press, I let go. Only a part of that clay is changed. So it has to, that's why when I'm centering, I have the wheel going really fast. So the more rotations, the faster it changes. So I can make it do things like this really quickly. You can see, press it in, pull it up, press it down. So I can change the shape of the clay very quickly. And there's also other techniques you'll see when I'm doing the large platters. When I'm working with a larger piece of clay, I'll start doing this technique called coning, where I have to cause a compression, trying to find a spot where you can see. I'm trying to cause a compression to bring that clay up towards the center of between my hands, bring it up to a point. And then when I get that cone of clay, then I want to go ahead and force that back down. You see that inward and downward movement? So you can see the clay start to press forward for a second, so I'll show you again. So from here, you can see I'm actually pushing forward. As I push forward, that clay sinks right back down into the center of the wheel. So that's the pressure that I'm always trying to create, this inward and downward pressure to get that clay to sink right back into the center of the wheel. Once the clay is centered, now I want to open it up. So I use this arm that I have locked and stable as kind of a scaffolding. So it's just a support system. So it locks this right hand in place. Again, I don't want to be pressing and just kind of going wherever I want here. Yeah, it can be hard to pay attention to the lesson when you're being mesmerized by the clay. Sometimes I give the lesson and then I just give people time to play and just kind of figure it out on their own and just see what happens. At this point, I'm going to find the center. I'm going to press down with the pad of my finger. So I'm pressing down, not the tip of my finger. And I want it to feel like I'm pressing down into a whirlpool. My finger's going to, I'm going to apply a pressure and my finger's going to sink right down into the middle. If I go off center, then it's going to start looking like my finger's doing the hula. It's like going around and around and it's not centered, right? So when it's centered, it just sits still. And then I start to press, I hold steady, and then I press down, and then the clay opens right up. At some point, you have to make a decision about how deep you've gone. There's different methods of measuring, but since I've done it, I don't even know how many times at this point, I just instinctively know where to stop for the most part. And then once you get down, then you create a compression. So I pressed down into the clay, and then I created a clamp, and I'm pulling towards my palm. So I'm creating this like clamp pulling in towards my palm. And what that did is it went from a kind of little cave like this where it's just dipped down inside, and then the piece is now open wide at that point. From here, I'm going to compress the floor of the pot. So basically, as you're pulling across the bottom, it's going to make ridges and little hills and valleys as you pull across the bottom. So now I go back in and I just compress the floor. It's just a slow motion where I'm moving from one side of the clay out to the edge, and then from the edge back again, very slowly, just trying to flatten the bottom of the clay. You like the splatter effect from the excess clay, yeah. Pretty works, yep. You can always do that, like sand art stuff. And then, so from here, I want to start to, so I've moved all of the clay out. So now everything is in this wall. So everything was solid, and now it's all moved out into this ring or donut of clay. So from here, I need to compress and lift that clay. So the compression is basically, I take my hands and I'm trying to get a depth. So I press in and then I move my hand straight up. And then I'm gonna go back down, I'm gonna press in a little bit more and then move my hand straight up, and then press in a little bit more, move my hand straight up. And I keep doing that until I get it the thickness that I want. Now, once you've done it long enough, you come up with little tricks and ways that you can get it done quicker. So most of the time, my first movement is it's like a pinch. I kind of use one hand, and I'm just pinching between my thumb and forefinger here. And I'm going to compress and lift. So I created a pressure between my fingers, and I just lifted the clay and brought it in and up. So that is my first movement. Now I'm going to switch. So where I was supporting that solid mass of clay with my left hand here on the outside, now that the solid mass of clay is in the wall, I have to support the clay differently. So I need to support that clay from the inside. And now my left hand which was outside, is now supporting the interior space. And I'm going to be pressing, if I want to bring it up into a cylinder, I'm going to press hard on the outside so that as I'm pressing, the clay's moving in, and then because it can't go anywhere because I'm stabilizing the interior space, now I can bring that clay up. If I press too hard from the inside, then the clay starts to flare out like a bowl. So I really want to make sure that the pressure I'm creating is an inward and upward compression. So I press in on the outside right at the base, locking my fingers in place, and then I'm just slowly moving my hand upward with the speed of the wheel. Now, control lift maneuver, it's like men get itchy. Yeah, right. So the Alexa, you crack me up, man. So the oh, all right, gotta get it together. The movement is a controlled compression. So I'm trying to get a depth, and then my hands are moving straight up. Again, I have to move with the speed of the wheel. So if I move too quickly, then I get a spiral where it's not being evened out. So that's what it looks like if I move too quickly, right? And so if I want to make sure that I'm thinning the clay evenly, then I need to work with the speed of the wheel. Just like I showed you earlier, if I draw a line on the wheel here, I want to compress, and then I can't move my finger up. I can only move up a fingertip's worth of space every time that line gets to me. So every time the line comes around, I can move up a fingertip's worth of space. Now when the wheel is spinning really fast, that looks like a smooth motion, like your hands are just gliding upwards. And then so at a slow speed, it looks like just kind of this little, just slowly moving up and up and up and up, one little ring at a time. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the stream, Alexi. I like having you here. Thank you. And so that's kind of the process that goes in. So basically, you're compressing, and you just hold. You don't want to compress. You don't want to keep squeezing. If I kept squeezing, it would get too thin, and then that thin spot would become a weak point, and the whole thing would collapse or rip off. So what I'm doing is I create that compression, and then I hold my fingers very, very still, and then I just pull my hands upwards. So I'm holding that same, it's like that same thing that I said about a clamp. Imagine you dialed in a wrench, right, to a depth, and it's locked in place, and then you move it up through the clay, and then you dial it in a little bit more, and then you pull it up through the clay. That's how this process works. So it does eventually become instinctive, or you have muscle memory that dictates how you move. And a lot of these things that I'm explaining, they're little bits and pieces or steps along the way. And eventually the idea is that it becomes fluid. So a good potter looks like their hands come together, they compress, they open up, they pull out, then they move straight into raising the wall, maybe do a collar, then raise the wall again, and then pull the rim, and then pull the rib up it, and then cut the piece off, lift it, and it's done. Literally that fast. So imagine, I'll do it again. Center, right, here we go. Center, compress, open up, pull out, pull the wall again, pull the rib, fix the rim, take the wire, pull the piece off, and set it on the thing. So it's just this, it becomes this fluid motion. So if you get really good at it, you can just start pulling pieces off the wheel every 30 seconds, 40 seconds, basically. Yeah. The other night, it got pretty late, and I was working, and I wanted to throw the teacups for the teapots, and I threw 12 mugs in like 8 minutes or something. It was pretty quick. Or was it 8 mugs? It was like 8 mugs in 10 minutes, actually. It wasn't too crazy, but it was still interacting with stream, with chat, and typically if I'm not interacting with anything, I can definitely get a mug a minute, sometimes faster, like 45 seconds, if I'm really just getting into it and I have everything prepped and I can just pull it off and move it. Pottery speedrun stream. 80% pottery speedrun. At some point I can do, so there are points in time in the year where I get very large orders, and if I have, you know, a piece or an order where I need to make a few hundred pieces, I might just do a here's my production, basically, instead of my art or playing stream. Yeah, that's just throwing a cylinder, but so the important thing to remember about the cylinder is that 90% of everything that's made on the wheel starts off as a cylinder. So all your bottles, all your jugs, vases, pitchers, all of those things start as cylinders. And then even plates are basically a very broad, flat kind of cylinder that you then just roll the rim all the way over. So it's a very similar thing. When you get into making things that have round bottoms, like bowls or the insides of goblets, or even certain bottles might have a round bottom. But when you make that concave bottom, then you need to throw a little bit differently the way that you're moving the clay up, and you're moving the clay in and up and out to thin it. And typically with a cylinder, you're not working towards a shape. You don't want to start shaping the piece at all until you have your cylinder. So if you know exactly what your cylinder's what the end result is supposed to be, if I know that I'm going for a flared cylinder, then I can pull the cylinder from the very beginning at a slight angle just to speed the work up. But if I say I wanted to play with a shape, I'm not going to play with the shape until I have my cylinder thrown exactly the way I want it. Any form of pottery or sculpting art of 3D space, I have so much respect for the math and beauty of it. Yeah, Lexi, it's definitely a very, very unique craft for sure. So at this point, this is where I have this cylinder. Now I can play with it. I can start to shape it, and I'm typically always working from the bottom to the top. So if I want it to have a little foot ring, I can get rid of a little bit of clay right here at the base. I can use my rib. So this is a potter's rib used for shaping. I can add a little bit of an extra detail there just to kind of highlight and emphasize that foot. And then I can also use it to start to shape or pull out or puff out the side, and also smooth the clay at the same time. So now you see I put that little belly in it. As I move to the neck, if I know that I want it to constrict a bit more, then I can do what's called collaring. So I'm going to bring that clay in and start to move it in towards the center. And then I can use different edges of the ribs, not just the flat side or these little points. I'm going to use the round side. I can press that round side in, really let that get cleaned up a bit. I can then use the sharp edge again if I wanted to add a neck or a separation between belly and neck. Right, so, and those are just little details that you can put in, and then I can go back and really shape the neck into a different shape, or pull the lip back out. I want to make sure that I smooth that lip over, especially if it's going to be a drinking vessel. I could always do extra little things, whatever you can think of. This is when you get to be creative. So this is where you're basically designing your work versus the production aspect of it. So when I'm going through and creating designs, I sit down with the cylinder and I just keep making different marks until I see something I like. And if I do, then I say, okay, well, maybe that's something I can produce, and what I do is I formulate the pattern that makes that shape. So I know I need to make the foot, I need to puff out the belly, I need to collar in the neck, then I pull out the rim, and then I take the rib and I make this bubble and I make that bubble, and then I make that line, make that line, make that line, polish it, cut it off, it's done. But I know what those steps are going to be, and I make sure that I do that every time. And what ends up happening, if I'm using the same amount of clay, I can just start pulling that shape over and over and over again. But the shaping can be just as many steps, if not twice as many, as it takes to throw the cylinder in the first place. Really, that's where you're doing all the work. So the more intricate the shape, the longer it's going to take me to make the cylinder. If it's just a basic cylinder that I'm going to take and sculpt or do something to, then it's going to come off the wheel very quickly. But if it's going to be something like this, then it's going to take a lot of time to make in the first place. And then Alexi said, especially the symmetry and physics of pottery, centrifugal force, properties of matter, it's just so amazing and captivating to me. Ooh, the angle you hold it at would change the curve. That's beautiful. Yeah, so it's really just about how you hold your tools, how you touch the clay, where you're pressing in. And then Mountain Mama says, nice that you can do so much with just one tool. Similar, but each piece is still unique. Yep, for sure. And there's lots of other tools. That's just, like I said, that's just one, or like you said, that's just one tool. And, you know, I've gone as far as to like make my own tools that have different edges and weird shapes and things that I can put into the piece to get different bits. Like this is actually a footing tool. It's hard to see in that camera. Okay, there's that angle. So with this, I can put a perfectly round foot on the bottom of my piece. You're very OCD, so the logic, math, patterns, science, analytical thinking, and such creative work as pottery just is so amazing to you. So much talent. Well, thank you so much, Alexi. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I do everything it's very thought out, very formulated, and that doesn't mean that you can't be creative and have fun. I'm very, I feel like by understanding the process in its entirety, it unleashes my ability to be creative with it. So I get to take all of the things I've learned and then apply it in a way where I'm just exploring form and shape, and I don't have to worry so much about, oh, how do I make a perfect cylinder? Half the cylinders I make, I don't even really worry. If it's just a plain cylinder, I don't even worry if it's 100% centered. Like I'm just trying to make it, pull it off the wheel, and then I might just alter it or change the shape anyway. And then with something like this, if I know that the form is going to have a very specific shape, then I'll make sure that I do it that exact way over and over and over again. Yeah, I really like the more abstract and kind of more organic. So it's funny because you have to start with something that's very uniform. So if I'm going to do a form that's going to have a lot of sculpture or be asymmetrical, then I start with the most perfect symmetrical piece that I can start with. So I want my base canvas to be that perfect shape, and then I'm going to take it and twist it and turn it, because if I start with a piece that's already kind of wonky or doesn't fit well or doesn't look right, when I start to do those alterations, it's just going to keep being wonky and messed up, and it doesn't quite have the aesthetic that I would want in a nice finished piece of artwork. You can really tell the difference between a piece that's made well and then altered and a piece that's just been like, oh well, this was funky and then I just kind of pushed it into a more funky to kind of cope with it being weird. Make it more weird because it's weird, right? So I mean, there's always that kind of place, but when you make a pot that's already like, oh well, this is a kind of a crappy pot, that's the perfect time to sit down and try those weird techniques where you're like, I do not care if I push the sidewall out and there's a giant hole in it, because now I get to play with it and see how far I can push the clay, and I didn't care about this piece anyway. And sometimes you're like, oh, I really like the way this turned out, but if you take what you learned from it and then apply it to a new piece where it's like, oh, here's a really nice cylinder and now I get to try that technique that I tried out on the other pot, you're going to make something you really, really like. And that's where I'm trying to get to every time. So that's Pottery 101. I hope you enjoyed the lesson this evening. You're welcome. that was actually the last ball of clay I had for cylinders. So that worked out. So I'm going to throw some platters now, actually. Nice. Yeah, it's good you asked for that when you did. Nice big old piece of clay here. Alexi says, I mean, I'm sure it's been done, but if I had this equipment to play around with, I wonder the possibility of making like a spherical shape and trying to form it to make more geometric, like icosahedra, type of shape without spinning. I don't think pottery is the medium for it, but it'd be fun to just mess around and give it a try. So, a lot of people carve their pieces into very geometric patterns and shapes, and so a lot of it's just surface. And there's like fun tools like let's see. So this is a little wheel. It's kind of hard to see. I don't know. That probably doesn't help. Anyway, these little wheels actually break down the geometry into, you know, your odd numbers and your even numbers, and then you can separate your pieces into geometric shapes. So I could take a cylinder that I just made, right, and then I can take this wheel and I put it down, and now I know where my subdivisions are. So if I want to put in a perfectly triangular pattern, right? Like that's the subdivisions for 3 put into that piece there. And then if I need to subdivide that again, now I have the measurements for that here as well. Sorry, it's not exactly 10, but anyway, these little discs help make it easier to separate your piece into different quadrants to get more geometric designs. And there's lots of carving and different techniques, ways to shape the clay or mold the clay. There's carving tools like Sureform and just any of these trimming tools, like even the ones that I was using, the ones that I used to carve the bottom, you can just take this and just start carving away at the piece to get those different shapes. Oh, the 20-sided platonic solid. Yeah, for sure. So the a couple weeks ago, the pottery challenge was to throw a sphere. So this was a sphere, and what I would do if I wanted to clean this up here, I'll actually work on cleaning it up a little bit. So granted, I didn't have this in any way, like, I wasn't holding around. A lot of the time what you can do if you want something to be a very specific shape is you make a cutout. You'll just have half of it cut out to the shape that you want, and then you can place that right up against the side so that it makes that perfect shape or circle that you want. So if I wanted this to be a perfect sphere, I could have used something to press up against it and make sure it was the exact shape I wanted. And then, so for this, what I would actually do is I'm going to cut some of the clay off the bottom. And I want to get underneath with the wire. I'm going to take this piece of clay that I'm going to center, and I'm going to make a chuck out of it. So I'm just trying to center up this clay. Used to sketch out geometric patterns and stuff. It was a hobby. Yeah, that's really cool. I love geometry. I use it a lot when I'm creating my artwork. I try to use the golden mean a lot of the time, and I'll use that ratio to help kind of craft my work, or I'll use the Fibonacci sequence to help guide my pattern or designs. But I've gotten to the point now where I've started trying to hide the math a little bit more so that the viewer doesn't have to be so... It's not like reading a book, right? I'm not putting a piece of art in front of you and expecting you to say, okay, well now I understand exactly what this person was doing. What I'm trying to do is create something using those patterns, that design, and then allow the viewer to subtly notice it so that it becomes a little bit more of a surprise. And there, again, it comes back to that same aspect of saying, I want you to discover something in the artwork and realize why you're attracted to it. And when you finally do realize why you're attracted to it, then it means a lot more to the viewer, rather than just being told, oh, this is a field and there's a crow on a fence. Like, but what does that mean? Well, no, it's just a field with a crow on, on a fence. And so what I want to do is say, well, here's this landscape. Now you find all the little bits and pieces that might be hidden in it. Alright, so I'm just tidying up the top of this form so that I can set this sphere inside of it. And I'm going to take the slip off so it doesn't just stick to it. So one nice thing, Alexi, is that you can. There are ways to make your pottery take a lot longer. You don't. It's not a very. You don't have to be as quick as say a glass blower. A lot of glass blowers, you start working with the glass and you need to make the piece fairly efficiently. Keep the heat on it. And when you're done making it, it gets puntied off and put in the annealer, and you're pretty much done except for cold working for the most part with that piece of glass. And you have the amount of time that you're willing to work in the shop on that particular piece for the most part. Now there's other things you can do like casting and other forms of glass blowing, but like furnace work, typically you're just like kind of in, form, finish it, do all your color or whatever. It can take a while, but it's really quick, kind of make it, you're done scenario. And with clay, you can just make it and be done with it. But you don't have to. You can keep plastic under it. You can use wet boxes to keep everything kind of moist. You monitor the hydration level of the clay basically, and depending on what you want to do with the piece, if you want to add more clay to it, then you need to keep it on the wetter side. If you want to have it hold its shape but be able to carve in it or remove clay, then you need it to be a little bit harder than what you would for attaching pieces to it. So it really just depends on what you're going for. And it can take as long as you want it to take, really. I have a student who I help with sculpture primarily. She doesn't work on the wheel or do like regular pottery, but she's using clay to make sculptures. And so some of the pieces she's making have been wet for months, and she's still making adjustments to faces and features as needed. So now I just want to get this centered up as best I can. It's a little off. Alright, so that's pretty good. You have to do prime numbers, yeah. It says 450! Nope, can only do 449, sorry. At least you know that's what it is, and it's to be multiples of 10. Goodness gracious. Sometimes that can be a little excessive, right? 30 to 40. That's a big difference. Yeah. So this piece is actually still a little wet from being wrapped under plastic since I threw it, even though I made it a couple weeks ago. it's still almost too wet to trim at the moment. So when the piece is too wet, you'll see the trimmings are kind of sticking to it as they come off. But also, if you're not very cautious with your tool, you can cut too deep or cut a big cut into it or a groove that can't be healed easily. So you have to be very wary of how much pressure you're applying. I think so. For a long time, Alexi, I tried to make perfect pots. That was like my ultimate goal was like, I just want to make perfectly round, perfectly proportionate, perfectly symmetrical pots. And so that was the goal, and I worked really hard at making forms that I thought fit that criteria. And every once in a while I would make a piece that I was like, all right, this piece is essentially perfect for what I was going for. And I found that as much as I like those perfect forms, there's a lot that's missing from them. It's missing the character, right? So in my mind, if I'm making a good piece, it should have some sort of emotion or bearing. It should have something that makes you feel something when you look at it. And if the piece is just perfect, sure, sometimes it can strike that, like, oh, this piece is just so perfect, and that is a feeling in and of itself. But I feel like you get more from a piece if it has some character flaw, right? Because we're not all perfect. Like I try to make my pieces a lot like I think of myself or people that I meet, or like characters in films and movies. Like, you don't want to watch a movie about the perfect person. Like, you want to watch a movie about those flawed people, those characters that have so much personality that you always remember them. And so that's kind of the way that I look at my pottery or my art. Is I am glad that I can take and make a perfect piece-ish, and then take that perfect piece and then do that sculptural work or turn it into some sort of asymmetrical form, and then push it past just looking like that perfect form. But it's not that it can't be done, you just have to spend a lot of time honing your skills to get to the point where you can make that work. Yeah. And so I do enjoy pots that have perfect symmetry and meet the golden ratio. It's definitely, it has a nice feeling when you look at a pot like that. But a lot of the times I see work that's just, I like the look of the pots that people make, in their first year or two of making pots, and they have this kind of wonkiness or wobbliness to them, and then I'm like, man, I wish I could actually force myself to make some of those mistakes, because I just can't anymore. to have like the freedom of letting my mind not get in the way of the series of steps that I go through to create the pieces that I make all the time. And that's actually one of the things that true Japanese masters kind of go through. Like, when you're making those like masterpiece teacups, they kind of have to get to the point, it's like they can't sit down and throw them every day, or at least in the reference that I'm speaking of, there's a potter named Shoji Hamada who would only throw teacups on very specific times, when it was like he felt that was the day that he could sit down and actually make those pieces and kind of release himself from the idea of any perfection, kind of free. It's a very Zen type of mentality where you're just allowing the actions to happen without thinking too much through what's coming out, and you get these very unique, special pots with their own little characters and flaws, and it's really nice to see. It was very satisfying to make, Alexi. Yeah. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to carve this excess clay off of this form so that I can get it closer to round. It's not perfect by any means. It's still a and being a nurse has done things to your mind. Yeah, right. All right. All right, so now we've got this kind of randomly round orb-ish piece of pottery. Like I said, I didn't make the top like 100% round when I was throwing it. It came out a little bit flatter than I wanted, and the bottom was a little bit more like elongated. So to trim it up and get it back into this spherical shape, it's kind of there but not really, and I'm worried that it's still so wet. There's more that can come off of this side, but I wanted to take more off, but it's still a little wet, and the closer I get to the actual center of the piece, the weaker the clay is going to be. So I'm going to let this harden up, and then I can trim this side down a little bit more. So it's going to be more like an orb, like a ovoid kind of orb, than it's going to be than a true sphere. So, but I mean, I'm fine with that. But it was fun to play with and practice on, and I can get this kind of bubbly, round, spherical thing to play with. But there are ways to make those different shapes. There's actually, I'll probably turn it into, like I said, a spherical kind of orb, and then I'll do some sort of low firing technique on it so it comes out looking like a very unique weathered stone, like the Sager technique that I use on a lot of pieces. Just it's something to give it a lot of character on the surface since it's so smooth and round. There's a lot of hand building techniques where you don't even need the wheel. You can take a you could take a bowling ball and create a plaster mold out of it, and then take slabs of clay or sheets of clay and then lay it in and form it, say like to half the mold, so the bowling ball would be split in two. You have one side here, and then you lay that sheet of clay in it. You take that, cut it off, take the other side, lay in another one, fit those two pieces together. Now you have a perfect sphere of clay. And then from there you could start shaping or sculpting it. You could even like pre-sculpt the form you wanted out of solid clay. So you take that clay, sculpt it, just take it solid, and then sculpt all the facets in it that you want, like that 20-sided form. And then take that piece and mold that and make a plaster mold in two sections with that form, and then you could remake that or slip cast even, where you pour liquid clay in and then have it form to that plaster interior, and then you could make a series of those pieces pretty easily in succession once you've got the form. So you don't always have to, start from this here on the wheel. There are lots of other ways to get to that point without the expensive piece of equipment. If I remember correctly, I think it was Belarus, but I'm not 100% on that. So when I was talking about compressing the inside of the cylinder, this is basically the exact same process that I'm doing right now. It's just you're adding a compression, but you're just sliding the top layer of clay a little bit to one side or the other to make the surface take a smooth, flat shape. Old doggos. Ah. Vladivostok. Yes, it also does help keep from cracking. The compressions that when I started doing compressions in the bottom of my mugs, I stopped having cracks for the most part. And recently I found that I was getting some cracking, but it wasn't like all the way through. It was just like a surface tension crack in the bottom of some of my pieces. It didn't even go all the way through the pot. It was just like a tiny little crack in the base. And I think it was from drying on a board. It didn't have complete airflow, so as it was creating some surface tension. And yeah, so you have to be careful, but the compression helps a lot on the outside. Blake, thank you for the follow, by the way, and welcome to the stream. Yeah, it was like on the very bottom on the outside of the mug. It was just like this little bit of a crack. Old doggo. Oh, you found the throwdown today. The only potter you knew before was playing the mud. Yeah. Yeah, so the throwdown has been really cool. I've actually found way more potters on Twitch since I joined. Because I didn't know about it either until I guess it was a few days before the registration ended. Luckily, I was able to sign up for it in time. Yeah, but it's been a lot of fun meeting all the other potters on Twitch. Are you a ceramic artist on Twitch as well, Blake, or do you do it on your own, or an enthusiast? Them levels. Streamed a few times, but you throw nice. I just started streaming for the throwdown, so I've been at it for a month now. Going on week 5 here. Really enjoying it so far. Yes, you may ask any pottery question you like, Alexi. Right now, Blake, I'm streaming twice a week on Wednesday and Thursday, and I hope to bump that up as I lock in a better schedule to well, it's taken me a while to get all my equipment and my stream together, and that's finally coming to a good point, and now it's just balancing my teaching schedule and my own production schedule to work with the stream. So hopefully more in the future, but right now just a couple days a week. Why do we say throw? Like maybe it's English language context that I don't get, but doesn't that quite different from like throwing a ball or something? Or is it just because, not really an answer maybe. It's a good question. Yeah, so that is a good question. I don't have great answer for that at the moment. But one of the ways that potters used to stretch clay is by throwing it. And I don't know if it's the action or what the name comes from specifically, but I'll look into it. I'll let you know in the Discord. Alright, so I need to get, throwing slabs, like stretching them out. You can throw it and you use the weight of the clay itself to stretch it. I definitely throw it onto the wheel. That's for sure. Alright. So I'm trying to get a nice smooth transition into the rim of this platter. I'm sure there's a reason for it, Alexi, and I'm just not 100% sure on where the verbiage comes from. I mean, there's a lot of things that potters say that are just from a long time. You know, this art form has been around for a very, very long time, and even the temperatures. So I've been trying to be kind and tell you specific temperatures as I'm explaining where I fire the pieces to. But technically, if I were talking to another potter, I would just say I fired a cone 10 or cone 6 or cone 7 or cone 8 or cone 06. And those cones, they're actually what we call witness cones, or these little pieces of earth and minerals and chemicals that are combined that melt at very specific temperatures. And so you would put a witness cone in your kiln that would melt at a specific temperature so that you could see when the cone is fallen over, and then you know that the kiln is at that specific temperature. Now, so like cone 10 is 2,350 degrees in Fahrenheit or American units. And there's a lot of other terminology and words that go along, like I was explaining how the different parts of the pot were related to human anatomy and different things like that. But there's a whole lot of lingo and terms and language that gets passed on. Thanks, Blake. See, Blake will help you out with the non-American units. Yeah, cone 6. Cone 6 is 2,232 degrees Fahrenheit in American units. Well, you can always fire to 2351. It won't hurt anything. 06 is 1828, I believe, in Fahrenheit. 1000 C. Alright, so here's platter number 1. big guy. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, the crystals are a really nice way to finish the platters. I like to do the platters in large bowls in the crystalline glaze because you don't have to grind the base. A lot of the times the crystal glazes will run off the bottom of the pot if it's on the outside. Now there are ways that you can put it on the outside without it running off, but you have to know your glaze and how far it's going to run. And then you can work on doing that. But on the inside of a piece, you can really just kind of go wild with putting the crystals on and not worrying about it running off or anything. It's nice how the 50 multiples do that. 349, 401, 499, perfect for cooking with OCD. And then Blake says, I built a computer controller with a Raspberry Pi and thermocouple chip. Native is Celsius, so I wrote the whole program using C. Nice. That's very cool, Blake. It's awesome what you can do with those Raspberry Pis, for sure. Raspberry Pi. Raspberries. Everyone's ready for a snack. No! Lack of raspberries! What are we gonna do? Blake says it's really satisfying to define a firing profile. The program graphs it and then overlays the actual performance of the kiln, and the lines do not vary more than a degree or two. That's really awesome, Blake. Yeah, I write a lot of my own firing schedules and program them directly into my controllers, so I don't get to actually see how it fires off, degree by degree or over, every minute over the hour or anything. That would be really interesting information to be able to watch. And yeah, that's very cool. Wow. Yeah, Alexi learned more English from Twitch in 3 months than he did in classes in 3 years. That's awesome. Oh, in a month. He did in 3 years. How often do I hear the relays clicking on and off? I would say the relays that I'm using click on and off every... It really depends on what part of the cycle it's in. And the kiln has 3 relays. The period in time in which they're turning on and off is about... It would be under 10 seconds. I can't give you an exact amount. And that really depends on what cycle it's in. If it's preheat, it's obviously a lot longer. Well, the preheat can click on pretty often, but it really just depends. I haven't really sat there and listened or watched. I used to have a kiln that had clear relays and I could watch them click on and off, and that was really cool. But the kiln I have right now has these black relays and I can't see in them to tell which one's flipping on and off when. Yeah, the only way to truly learn a language is to just embarrass yourself and talk to people. Yep. So Blake, are you saying that you actually watch your firing cycle the entire time that it's firing to make those decisions? The computer does, yeah, okay. Well, I've been able to understand you just fine, Alexei, so far, no big deal. I think a lot of people speak in broken English in text anyway, so it's kind of neither here nor there if it's a little off. Plus, we are always battling autocorrect and trying to figure out what someone's saying anyway, even if they know what they're talking about. Oh, the beauty of the internet. yeah, a little bit different. So each one's a little bit like a different weight, and so I'm just kind of, I want different shaped canvases basically. So I have a gallery show coming up in June, and I want to have some wall pieces. So I'm trying to make some different forms that I can glaze and do different things to and hang on the wall. So I don't really care for them to all necessarily be exactly the same at this point. so, so you know how we were talking about the firing temperatures and the chemistry of glazes? The kiln itself, while firing, you have to have certain ramp and cooling holds, and there's a lot of, well, I mean, I'm not sure if Blake is specifically getting into what he's talking about for that specific reason, but what Blake was talking about before was he's using a computer to figure out his ramp hold cycles on his kiln. So he's using the equations, I believe, to come up with the cycle, the kiln cycle, the firing cycle. So in the kiln, you're putting the clay through a basically molecular change. You're taking all of the raw earth minerals and turning them into glass, and so you're taking the nice. Okay, so he's using the algorithms to look at where the kiln is and where you want it to be, and then decide how to get there. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so basically, like, if you want your kiln to have a preheat where it's firing up to like 200 degrees for a while, just below boiling point to dehydrate the clay, and then it sits there, and the kiln is making the controller is making active decisions on whether or not it needs to heat certain regions or zones of the kiln to decide whether or not it's getting too hot and it needs to shut off, or if the bottom needs to turn on. And then as it starts to ramp, you're going into a firing cycle where you need to rise like 100 degrees an hour or 200 degrees an hour for until you get up to like 1100 degrees or so. 1100 degrees is a point in the clay firing process where you're hitting what's called quartz inversion. And quartz inversion is the beginning of the silicates starting to form their crystalline matrix inside the clay body. And then you're also burning off, there's processes leading up through that where you have off-gassing and you're burning off any carbons and different things like that in the clay body itself. And then up past that, you're just reaching temperatures and you're trying to kind of get up to peak temperature, and then you can have cooling processes. And like the crystalline firing that we were talking about earlier, to grow crystals you have to hold the kiln after you fire it up to its peak temperature. You bring it back down and then you hold it somewhere between 18 and 1900 degrees Fahrenheit. And the kiln would have to make decisions about how to get to those points in time, so the algorithm has to cope with that. Yeah. I believe it goes up through 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's definitely changing beforehand too. That's why if you look at most ramp cycles, it's going fairly slow up through that stage until sometimes even up to 12 or 1300 degrees Fahrenheit before it really starts to ramp up. Stupid bat. Alright, so see if I can fix this at all. Why are you not going on right? Oh, that's maddening. Alright. Well. I'll have to put that one on my other wheel. See if it that doesn't stick on there quite as hard. Where are these fingers? Don't mind me. I'm just here for your entertainment, fighting a wheel. My bat pens are super sticky for some reason. It's all part of the process, yep. Well, so when you pull a rim out like that, and if your back gets stuck and then pops like that, then the rim can flop, which is what happened on that last piece. And if I can't get my bat to fit on without sticking, then it's just gonna do it again. So I don't want to fight it. It's like, there we go. All right. Have I seen the bald guy with the upside down pottery wheel that throws with his head? I have not. Sounds a lot like a jig, basically. You can put like I said earlier, if you put whatever shape you push, whatever shape you push against the clay, it takes that shape. So I guess, you take your bald head, you stand up into the clay, and there it goes. You form a bowl around your head. Yeah, if it's upside down, it can't flop, right? It's hilarious. Hopefully he doesn't use a very groggy clay. You've been using speckled buff. I have some speckled clay. Currently, I'm using. So I got some Miller 50, which is the speckled clay that I'm using, and I don't really like it 100%. Like, I like it mixed a little bit. I've taken some of the scraps and mixed it in. I use little loafers a lot for my production wear, and I've been using that clay with the little loafers, and I like it a bit better. And then I use a really buff stoneware called Sold 860, and that's the stoneware I use for all my low fire and sculptural stuff. And sometimes I mix that with the little loafers as well, because it has a lot of grit in it. And the little loafers helps brighten it up a bit and give it a little less grit. but the Sold 860 is very plastic, and I really enjoy it for the most part. Sold 860 is a Laguna clay, and the Little Loafers is a high water clay body, and the Miller 50 is also a Laguna clay body. Yeah, I think I gotta go after this one too, Mountain Mama. It's getting a little late and I need to have dinner, so it's about my sign off time. So just gonna polish this one up here and then finish my tea and Aardvark makes Sold 8. Yeah, the Aardvark. Okay. Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks for hanging out tonight. The Laguna is Axner, also is the name of the company. I mean, if you have a recipe, most clay companies will mix whatever you want if you ask them. Or if you know what you're looking for. They have a lot of custom blends. I wouldn't mind getting this clay, this Sold 860 with a bit more kyanite in it, so that the appendages could hold on stronger in a low fire. Kyanite, yeah, it's a so kyanite forms longer crystals. Well, I mean, we use mica and all sorts of stuff, but you can use kyanite in clay, and because of the way that it crystallizes in the long, thin spikes, if you make something like an appendage, like a handle coming off the side of a pot, those crystals go deeper through the joint and make a stronger bond. So even at a low fire, when the clay is not completely vitrified, it holds a lot tighter and can have a more resilient piece of pottery. All that chemistry stuff. Well, thank you all so much for hanging out tonight. I really appreciate it. Thanks for chatting it up. It's always fun when we have something to talk about. And tomorrow I'll probably be doing a little bit of sculpting, a little bit of finishing, trying to work on some of those tiki mugs, and then I'll try to do maybe one of those face hugger mugs if the people who requested it are in chat. Yeah, nice to meet you too, Blake. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out tonight. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we get to talk to you soon. It looked like you popped up the Discord, so if you hop in the Discord, feel free to say hi in there, and if you have anything else you want to talk about, I'm more than open to talk about it. I start at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and I typically stream for about 3 hours. If I get raided towards the end of the stream, sometimes I'll stay on till about 10, but yeah, so typically I'm scheduled from about 6 to 9. I may or may not get some slip on some of these platters tomorrow. Put some nice white slip on there, maybe a little bit of texture, we'll see. Probably make a couple more. Treatment, yeah. I like to play with slip and get some texture in there. I also like to do a bunch of like colored slips and stuff sometimes. The surface treatment is always a fun little departure. Plus the clay body, the soldate, because it's such high grog, like a very groggy clay, putting the white clay on top of it helps give a bit of a smoother surface so that it's not quite as bumpy or gritty in the end. Sometimes with the white clay it gets a little smoother and you get that nice white finish for the glazes to pop on as well. Alright everyone, I hope you have a great evening. Be well, and I'll catch you next time. Good night.